Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS. MLB Friday, we got 15 games on the board, loaded slate, got a bunch of bets open. Should be a good one. I'm going to go through a bunch of them in this video, but whatever we don't get to, we'll go through every single one on the live show. 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you in the comments. As far as Thursday, I had another good one, man. I went 2-1, but one of my wins was my top bet. I had a full unit on the Reds at plus money. That was a nice one. So since I returned from Atlantic City, 4 consecutive winning days. It's been a clean slate. All winning days this week. Hopefully that continues. Yeah, Friday, 15 games. Let's do it.
Welcome to the SWUS. The SWUS. SWUS. Hey, get the SWUS.
First up, we got the Marlins on the road in Philadelphia. Obviously, Phillies are huge favorites at home here, minus 260, minus 275, depending on your sports book. Total sitting at 8.5. We got Kyle Tyler pitching for the Marlins against Christopher Sanchez for the Phillies. Before we get into this one, let's take a look at some ROI numbers. I mean, obviously, the Phillies have been much more profitable than the Marlins this year. Same goes for the Phillies at home, plus 15.6% ROI at home this year. Marlins on the road have not even been close to profitable. So let's go ahead and get into the matchup. We'll start with the Marlins bats, and it's a crime scene. In the last 30 days, 30th in WRC+, 30th in OPS, 30th in WOBA, dead last across the board. Against left-handed pitching, you guessed it, one of the worst in baseball. In the last 30 days, 28th, 29th, 28th. How about on the road? Maybe the numbers look better on the road? No, just as bad. 30th across the board on the full season. Last 30 days, 30th, 30th, 30th. The Marlins offense is about as bad as it gets in this league. The last 4 lefty starters to pitch against the Marlins, a 108 ERA, 080 whip. So lefty starters have had no problems pitching against this Marlins team. And here are the game logs. Cole Reagans blanked them. Mitchell Parker blanked them. DJ Hurts, 6 shutout innings, just 1 hit. What the hell? Mackenzie Gore, 7 innings, just 1 earned run. They did get David Peterson. That was back on June 12th. So there's one lefty starter they were able to hit off of, but as a whole, Marlins are not getting to lefty starters at all. I guess some decent news would be the Marlins actually have okay numbers against the sinker. In the last 30 days, they're 15th. That is Christopher Sanchez's maiden pitch, so I guess that's something. But as a whole, it's looking bad for the Marlins bats. Speaking of Christopher Sanchez, let's take a look at his numbers, and he's been great. On the season, he's got a 2.67 ERA and a 1.28 whip. Even better than that in the last 5 starts, last 2 starts, looking excellent. He's been especially good at home this year. On the season at home, 1.59 ERA and an even 1 whip. In the last 4 home starts, last 2 home starts, he's been even better than that. Now, I'm a little concerned with his righty-lefty splits. You can see he's much better against lefty bats, and he's going to be pitching against 8 righties here, but that's not unusual for a lefty starter. I mean, when a lefty takes the mound, more often than not, they're going to be pitching against 7, 8 righty bats. So this isn't out of the ordinary, but there's a lot of righties in the Marlins lineup, and Christopher Sanchez definitely worse numbers against righties. But again, they're all Marlins, so how dangerous are they really? Here are Christopher Sanchez game logs. You can see great start, 7 shutout innings at home against the D-backs. Great start at home against the Padres. He did struggle on the road in Fenway, but look at his last 3 home starts. I mean, 3 gems in a row. He has not pitched against the Marlins yet this year, but he did pitch against them September 8th of last year, and he was great. 5 innings pitched, 4 hits, 1 walk, no earned runs, so 5 shutout innings there. I mean, as far as making a prediction on this side, Christopher Sanchez has been excellent at home. The Marlins can't hit for shit. It's pretty simple. Christopher Sanchez on paper should be fine here. On the other side, we got the Phillies bats, and these numbers look great. Last 30 days, this is a top 10 lineup. Last 14 days, this is a top 5 lineup. As far as their numbers against right-handed pitching, they look about the same. Last 30 days, top 10 lineup. Last 14 days, last 7 days, looking more like a top 5 lineup. As far as their numbers at home, same. Top 10 lineup, top 5 lineup across the board here. Full season, last 30 days, last 14 days. Now, if you are looking to poke holes in the Phillies bats, you can say, hey, last 3 righty starters to pitch against the Phillies, 3.14 ERA and a 1.47 whip. So the last 3 righty starters, if you combine them, actually have decent numbers against the Phillies. But if you actually take a look at the game logs, it's really just one game. Matt Waldron, they couldn't get to him. 7 innings pitched, just 1 earned run. And he's not a typical righty. Guy throws the knuckleball. So I don't even think you can include him when you're talking about their numbers against righties. Look at the other righties they've seen. Casey Mize, Slade Ciccone, Michael King, Randy Vasquez. These are not exactly Cy Young candidates here. And if you go back to mid-June in the Baltimore series, they saw Corbin Burns and Grayson Rodriguez. They actually didn't get to those guys. So the last time the Phillies saw some decent righty starters, they actually were struggling. They've seen a bunch of easy righty starters in a row. So that's something to point out. So the question becomes, do we consider Kyle Tyler a decent righty starter? Well, his pitch mix, he throws the cutter and the curveball mostly. Phillies 12th and 4th against those pitches in the last 30 days. He's only made one career start, and it was last week against the Mariners, and he wasn't even good in it. I mean, he was okay. I shouldn't say that. He threw 4 innings, 2 earned runs, 3 hits, and 3 walks. 6 base runners in 4 innings against the Mariners lineup isn't anything to write home about. We don't have much data here for Kyle Tyler, but we can pull up his righty-lefty splits. As you can see, he's gotten rocked by lefties, and he has good numbers against righties. Phillies have some dangerous lefties in that lineup. I mean, Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper, 6 lefties in the Phillies lineup. But something I have to mention here, he's only faced 24 batters. So we're talking about 12 at-bats versus lefties and 12 at-bats versus righties. So this data, I mean, we could just throw it all out. It's such a small sample size that it's almost not even worth talking about. As far as making a prediction on this side, I mean, I do think it's a sell high spot for the Phillies bats. They've seen a lot of easy righty starters, but am I really going to put faith in Kyle Tyler to pitch a good game on the road in Philly? I mean, that just sounds crazy. I'm sure the Phillies will be able to score runs on him. As far as the bullpen matchup, the Marlins bullpen has been much better. In the last 30 days, they're actually a borderline top 10 bullpen. Problem is the Phillies have been arguably the best bullpen in baseball in that span. In the last 30 days, they're first across the board. And offensively against bullpens, no question, huge edge Philadelphia. They've been a top 10 lineup against bullpens in the last 14 days. And the Marlins have been one of the worst in baseball in that time. As far as betting this game, I mean, it would only be Phillies here. They should bounce back strong after taking the loss earlier tonight. So it would only be Phillies -1.5, but it's still -135, -140 to lay the 1.5. And I'm not trying to lay that kind of juice along with laying a 1.5 with the home team. So Phillies -1.5 for pass. Next up, we got the Nats on the road in Tampa to play the Rays. Rays are -150 favorites at home, total sitting down at 7.5. Mitchell Parker on the mound for the Nats. Zach Eflin pitching for Tampa. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we got a slight lead on the Rays after 5 innings, 2.95 to 2.57. Final score, very slight lead on the Rays, 4.97 to 4.7. So before we get into this matchup, let's take a look at the ROI numbers. Obviously, the Nats have been much more profitable than the Rays. Nats, for a period, were the most profitable team in baseball. Those days are long in the past. As you can see, if you've been betting the Nats, you've been taking a bath recently. -21.67% ROI in the last 10. Meanwhile, Tampa, who has a negative ROI on the season, last 10 games, if you've been betting the Rays, you've been making money. Last 5 games at home have been profitable for the Rays, and the Nats on the road just haven't. So recently, the Rays have been a better ticket to hold than Washington. So let's take a look at the matchup. We'll start with Zach Eflin. On the season, pretty mediocre numbers, 4.20 ERA, 1.14 whip. Same goes for the last 9 starts, the last 4 starts. He's been pretty average, much better at home, and that was the case with Eflin last year as well. He was almost untouchable last year at the Trop. Not quite as good this year, but still, in the last 4 home starts, he's got a 1.42 ERA and an 0.99 whip. So no question, he's been great at home. Here are his home away splits on the season. 2.90 ERA at home compared to a 5.01 on the road. You can see Woba looks significantly better at home as well. He's matched up against the Nationals lineup, who have some pretty mediocre numbers across the board here. In the last 30 days, 19th, 19th, and 19th. Slightly better than that in the last 14 days, the last 7 days. As far as their numbers on the road, they look about the same. In the last 30 days, 18th, 15th, and 16th. So pretty average, maybe slightly below average on the road. Against right-handed pitching, they look about the same. Last 30 days, 18th, 18th, and 20th. So the Nats pretty consistently mediocre here. They have struggled to get to righty starters recently. The last 3 righty starters to pitch against the Nats, a 2.37 ERA and an 0.95 whip. And here are the game logs if you want to see who they are. Now, I will say that graphic said the last 3 righty starters, but it's really just the last 2. Dylan Cease and Matt Waldron. They were able to get to Cal Quantrill a little bit, and they were also able to get to Dakota Hudson. But before that, they struggled to get to Ryan Nelson. They did get to Brandon Pfaadt. So you can see there were a couple instances on this chart where they were able to get to a righty starter, but there's also a handful of instances where they were not able to get to a righty starter. One angle I like for Zach Eflin here is he is not a pitcher who walks guys. He's got a 1.78% walk rate on the year, which is crazy. Look at the Nats numbers against righties who struggle with command. They're actually a good lineup with righties that put guys on base, but against righties with a walk rate below 6%, they're a bottom 10 lineup. So that's a nice little angle for Eflin there. Also, Zach Eflin, dominant against lefty bats. 273 WOBA and a 107 whip against lefty bats. Look how many lefties in the lineup for Washington. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Usually there's 6. So it looks like there's only 5 in the projected lineup here. Before the 4 of the first 5 hitters for the Nats are lefties. So I like that for Eflin as well. I will say it's a little concerning to see the Nats actually have good numbers against the sinker. That is Zach Eflin's main pitch, but his other main pitches are the cutter, the curveball, and the slider, and the Nats have pretty bad numbers against all 3 of those. Now, as far as Zach Eflin's history against the Nationals, it actually looks terrible. 1-3 with a 7.07 ERA and a 150 whip, but all 6 of those games were between 2019 and 2022. So we're talking at least 2 years ago. As far as the current Nationals lineup against Zach Eflin, 48 career plate appearances, just a 442 OPS, and he's got a strikeout rate above 32%. So the current Nats batters, he's had no problem with. Overall on this side, I think Zach Eflin's in a good place to deal. I like Zach Eflin to pitch a great game at home here. On the other side, we got Mitchell Parker, and he's having a great season. 330 ERA, 110 whip, 393 expected FIP. Last 10 starts look solid. Last 4 starts look solid. As far as his numbers on the road, maybe they dip a little bit. He's definitely been better at home in Washington, but still, these numbers aren't bad. His last 6 road starts, 436 ERA, 130 whip. That's not bad at all. Here are his recent game logs, and you can see his last start was on the road in Coors, and he did struggle, but it's Coors Field, so we can almost eliminate these from the game logs. Before that, he struggled a little bit in Detroit. He didn't allow an earned run, but 7 base runners in less than 5 innings of work. Before that, struggled on the road in Cleveland, let up 3 runs in Atlanta. So no question, you could see we're looking at his last 7 game logs here. Definitely better in the home starts for sure. So how will he fare on the road in Tampa? Well, the Rays bats, look at these numbers, man. The last 30 days, this is a borderline top half lineup, kind of. 12th, 16th, and 15th. But the last 14 days, last 7 days, looking like a top 10 lineup. As far as their numbers at home, I mean, look at the last 14 days. This is a super small sample size, but they look much better. The Rays have been terrible trying to score runs at home all season. So the fact that they're no longer in the bottom 5 in the last 14 days, that's a huge improvement. As far as their numbers against left-handed pitching, I mean, not bad. In the last 30 days, 15th, 17th, and 18th. If you look at the last 7 days, you see they're second across the board, but they haven't seen a lefty starter in 2 weeks. So that's against lefty bullpen arms, which would be an insanely small sample size. And when you look at the lefty starters numbers against the Rays, again, we're talking about over 2 weeks ago. The last 2, 138 ERA and an 0.85 whip. So they did not get to the last 2 lefties they've seen. But if you pull up the game logs, you can see Chris Sale and Justin Steele, and 2 weeks ago. So take it with a grain of salt. They struggled to get to Sale and Steele. There's a lot of lineups that struggle to get to those 2 guys. Before that, they got to Cole Irvin a little bit. They got to Braxton Garrett. They got to Luzardo. So if we rewind back to early June, you could actually see the Rays were getting to lefty starters. Tampa also has solid-looking numbers against Mitchell Parker's pitch mix, against lefties with his top 3 pitches. They're 9th in WOBA, 13th in isolated power, 6th in run value, and 12th in barrel rate. So that's pretty solid. Top half of baseball against his pitch mix. But there is one thing. If you're looking to back Mitchell Parker, and I understand if you are, he's been solid this year. You can point to the fact that he's got great numbers against righty bats, and the Tampa lineup is projected to have 9 righties in it. All 9 batters are projected to be righties. Look at Mitchell Parker's numbers against righty bats. They're solid. 262 WOBA and 103 whip. So there's something. If you're looking to back Parker, if you're looking to take the Nats in this spot, you can look at the righty-lefty splits for Parker. Personally, I think the Rays are going to get to him. So I think Eflin pitches well, and I like the Rays to get to Mitchell Parker here. As far as the bullpen matchup, slight edge to the Rays. In the last 30 days, they're pretty average. Nats bullpen slightly below average. Pretty close, though. Offensively, against opposing bullpens, edge goes to the Rays. A little more of an edge here. Actually, the Rays in the last 30 days have been a top 10 offense in the late innings. 7th in WRC+, 11th in OPS, 9th in WOBA. The Nats have been a bottom 10 lineup in those instances. So in the late innings, no question the edge goes to the Rays. Both of these teams had the day off, so travel isn't a huge issue, but it's definitely worth mentioning that the Nats were in Colorado on Monday. Then they flew out west to San Diego for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, then flew all the way across the country to Tampa. So the Nats have been flying all across the country this week. Meanwhile, Tampa hasn't traveled in 4 or 5 days, sitting at home with a day off. So definitely a favorable spot for the Rays. Both bullpens should be rested. It's definitely got to be a Tampa spot for me. I like Zach Eflin to deal. I do think the Rays will get to Mitchell Parker, but even if they don't, Rays should have the advantage in the late innings. I bet it. I took Tampa money line. I laid the juice. I laid minus 150 here. I know it's ugly, but I'm on the race. Next up, we got Texas on the road in Baltimore. Orioles are favored at home, -140. Total sitting at 8.5. Max Scherzer is on the mound for the Rangers. Albert Suarez pitching for the O's. Before we get into this matchup, let's take a look at some ROI numbers here. Baltimore's obviously been more profitable than Texas, plus 8.3% ROI, -13% ROI from the Rangers. Neither of these teams have been profitable as of late, though. They both have about a negative 22% ROI in the last 10 games. Baltimore at home has been slightly profitable this year, plus 4.3%. Texas on the road has been dreadful. In fact, last 5 games on the road, -100% ROI. So I guess they've lost 5 straight road games. That makes sense based on what we've seen this year. So let's take a look at the matchup. We'll start with the Rangers bats. Last 30 days, 29th across the board. One of the worst lineups in baseball in the last month. Last 7 days looking slightly better, but still by no means good. Their numbers against right-handed pitching, last 30 days, dead last across the board. Last 14 days, dead last across the board. So this team has not been getting to right-handed pitching. Their numbers on the road in the last 30 days, just as bad. 29th, 29th, and 29th. So this Rangers team not hitting right-handed pitching, not hitting on the road. As far as righty starters, last 5 righties to start a game against the Rangers, 2.36 ERA and a 1.05 WHIP. So they're not getting to righty starters either. Here are the game logs, and you can see there actually were a couple instances where they did get to the righty starters, but they're few and far between. They got to Alec Marsh on June 23rd. They also got to Luis Severino back on June 18th, but every single other righty starter on this list was able to pitch a great game against Texas. Bryce Wilson, Freddie Peralta, Brady Singer, Michael Wacha, Logan Gilbert. I mean, there's some names on this list that gave Texas some serious problems. As far as Albert Suarez pitch mix, his main 3 pitches are the four-seam fastball, the cutter, and the changeup. Rangers actually have good numbers against the cutter, but the fastball and the changeup, they're terrible. One of the worst lineups in baseball. Speaking of Albert Suarez, having a great season, 2.70 ERA and a 1.33 WHIP, but look at his last 2 starts, 8.31 and a 2.77. So, goddamn, last 2 starts really rough for Albert Suarez. But both those starts were on the road. His numbers at home look excellent this year. He's got a 1.88 ERA and a 1.13 WHIP at home this year. Expected FIP numbers indicate he's had some good luck in his home starts, but still, he's been pitching great. Let's not take away credit from the guy. Here are his game logs. You can see the last 2 starts. At Houston, at Yankee Stadium. Good Lord, that's ugly. In Albert Suarez defense, those are arguably 2 of the toughest places to go pitch if you're a righty starter this year. On the road in Houston, on the road in Yankee Stadium. Before that, he had a home start against the Braves. Solid start. I mean, in fact, every single start on here, well, the one in St. Louis is only 2/3 of an innings, but the 4 game logs before those 2 road starts are all great. So Albert Suarez, really, he's been solid this year. I'm a little worried about his whip against lefties, up at 148, so he's allowing lefties on base at a much higher rate. Rangers are going to have some lefties in the lineup. They're projected to have 6 lefties in their lineup. That's not something I'd like to see for Suarez. Also, Albert Suarez is not a strikeout guy. He's got an 18.7% strikeout rate. Look at the Rangers' numbers against righties with a strikeout rate below 19%. They're actually a top 10, maybe even a top 5 lineup against those types of pitchers. So there are some angles here that point to some Rangers runs, even though Albert Suarez as a whole has been so good at home. Definitely a couple angles I like here for Texas. On the other side, we got the Baltimore lineup, and obviously we know those have been great in the last 30 days. This is the second best lineup in baseball. As far as their numbers against righties, first across the board in the last 30 days, and they haven't slowed down. As far as their numbers at home, this is a top 3, top 4 lineup at home, and they have been all season. In the last 30 days, top 5, top 10. So the Orioles, they hit righties, they hit at home. We know this. But then we get to the starters. The last 3 righty starters to pitch against the Orioles, an even 2 ERA and a 1.17 WHIP. And then we pull up the game logs and look at who they are. Carlos Carrasco, Tanner Bybee. Now, Tanner Bybee's been great. You know what? Ronel Blanco's been great, too. So I'm not going to say these are bad names with the exception of Carrasco. But 3 righty starters in a row were able to pitch good games against Baltimore. Is this the Orioles lineup cooling off, or is this just a rough stretch? I mean, Carlos Carrasco at home, 5 innings pitched, 2 earned runs, 8 base runners. I mean, the O's should be scoring more runs than that in a home game against Carrasco. Now, some good news for Baltimore would be they have some excellent numbers against Scherzer's pitch mix. You can see the 4-seam fastball, the slider, and the curveball are his 3 main pitches. They're 3rd, 9th, and 1st against those 3 pitches in the last 30 days. Now, obviously, we don't have much data on Max Scherzer. He's only made 1 start this season. It was last week against the Royals, and he was untouchable. 5 shutout innings, just 1 hit, no walks against the Royals. But I'm not throwing him a parade for that, because the Royals are pretty much the coldest lineup in baseball right now. So I'm not getting I'm not making any judgments from that. There's a lot of righty starters that could blank the Royals right now, so I don't really know what to think of that. Other than that, I'm really not sure what data we should use for Max Scherzer. I pulled up his righty-lefty splits from last season. You can see he's slightly worse against lefty bats, which could be an issue here because Baltimore is really lefty-heavy. 5 of their first 6 hitters are lefties, and there's a lot of all-stars in there. So I guess that's something, but Scherzer's a veteran. He knows how to get lefties out. If he's on his game, he could pitch well. I don't think we can predict what version of Scherzer we're going to see here. As far as the bullpen matchup, edge goes to Baltimore, but the Rangers bullpen has been much better than they were earlier in the season. In the last 30 days, they're actually a top-half bullpen. Still not as good as the Orioles bullpen, but still, to give the Rangers some credit, their bullpen's done a much better job. Same goes for the Rangers' offenses against bullpens, too. In the last 14 days, the last 7 days, they're definitely doing a much better job scoring runs in the late innings. Not nearly as good as Baltimore, but still, let's give the Rangers some credit. Either way, though, Baltimore has the edge in the late innings. Really don't feel comfortable placing a bet in this one. I mean, I think at the current price, Baltimore would have to be the move, but I don't really like them slumping against righty starters. Also, Scherzer's kind of a wild card. I can see him pitching really well. I also can see him getting shelled. I also think there's a chance Texas gets to Albert Suarez. So there's just way too many moving pieces in this one. For this video, I'll say over 8.5 or pass. I guess my favorite bet in this game would be the over, but I think there's a good chance I pass on this one. Next up, we got the New York baseball Yankees on the road in Toronto. Blue Jays are short home dogs here, plus 105, total sitting at 8.5. Nice little pitching matchup here. Stroman's on the mound for the Yanks. Kikuchi's on the mound for the Blue Jays. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we got to lean on Toronto here. 2.5 to 3.35 Blue Jays after 5 innings, 5.62 to 4.58 Toronto final score. So before we get into this matchup, let's take a look at some ROI numbers. Yankees have definitely been more profitable to bet this season than the Blue Jays, plus 8.2% ROI in the season to a minus 13.6. Yankees have also been a great team to bet on the road, plus 12.5% on the season, but that number is plummeting. You see in the last 5 games, you've been taking a bath if you've been backing the Yankees on the road. They're in a little bit of a cold stretch. The good news is Toronto's always in a cold stretch. Full season, last 10 games, last 5 games at home, they've never been profitable. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Yankees bats. And is this lineup cooling? I mean, I think these numbers are pretty clear. In the last 30 days, 10th, 11th, and 10th, but look at the last 14 days, the last 7 days. The Yankees bats definitely cooling down. Numbers on the road even cooling. This has been a great road lineup all season, top 5 road lineup. In the last 14 days, now that's a crazy small sample size for home-away splits, but still average numbers for the Yankees on the road. And their numbers against lefties, again, average as hell. In the last 30 days against lefties, 13th, 14th, and 13th. Look at this. The last 3 lefty starters to pitch against the Yankees, a 1.17 ERA and a 1.37 whip. Here are the game logs. Sean Manaea, 5 shutout innings, and that might have been more if that game didn't get delayed by rain. He might have stayed in the game. I'm not sure. Before that, struggling to get to David Peterson, didn't get to Max Fried, didn't get to Chris Sale. You got to go back to Cole Irvin on June 20th to find the last time the Yankees got to a lefty starter, and they've seen a lot of lefties. It's not like it's a lack of sample size. They've seen a ton of lefty starters recently, haven't really been hitting them, which brings us to Mr. Kikuchi, who's not having the best year, but for some reason, he just always pitches well against the Yankees. He's made 4 starts against the Yankees since last season. He's 3-0 with a 1.21 ERA and an 0.99 whip. So this is a guy that is not scared of the Yankees bats. Like I said, when we start looking at Kikuchi stats, though, he's struggling. In his last 3 starts, 7.36 ERA, a whip over 2. His last 3 home starts, 6.46 ERA, 1.43 whip. But then we pull up his game logs, and it makes a little bit of sense. I mean, those last 2 starts are terrible. On the road in Cleveland, I mean, I guess we could be like, oh, Cleveland is a dangerous lineup, which they are, but more so against righties, not against lefties. They crushed him. 9 base runners and 4 earned runs in just 2 innings of work. Also, Boston crushed him. 5 earned runs in just 4 innings of work. Before that, if you scroll back to June 1st, the Pirates rocked him. Before that, the Tigers rocked him. So Kikuchi as a whole, definitely not at the top of his game right now. I will say the pitch mix numbers look pretty favorable for Kikuchi, though. His main pitch is the 4-seam fastball, and the Yankees do have solid numbers against that pitch. They're 9th in the last 30 days, but look at his other pitches. The curveball, the slider, and the changeup. Yankees are bottom 5 or bottom 7 against all 3 of those pitches in the last 30 days. So I actually like these pitch mix numbers for Kikuchi. As a whole, tough to make a prediction on this side. I mean, you got Kikuchi, who always pitches well against the Yankees. Yankees bats cooling, but Kikuchi's been pretty poor recently. Makes him tough to back him. I think Kikuchi should pitch well. He always pitches well against the Yankees, but I don't know how much money I want to put on that take. On the other side, we got the Toronto Bats, and we are seeing signs of improvement here. In the last 30 days, they're a bottom 10 lineup, but look at the last 14 days, last 7 days, slight improvements. They're still not hitting at home. Last 30 days, it's a bottom 5, bottom 6 lineup at home. They haven't been hitting at home all season. But then we get to the numbers against right-handed pitching. 11th, 13th, and 12th in the last 14 days. So maybe they're starting to get the righties. And here are the righty starter numbers. 6.06 ERA. The last 4 righty starters to pitch against the Blue Jays. But then we pull up the game logs, and it's really just 2 games. Bayo and McKenzie. They crushed Tristan McKenzie. They crushed Brian Bayo. Other than that, I mean, you got Cutter Crawford. That game was suspended by rain. They didn't get to Tanner Houck. They didn't get to Carlos Carrasco. So although the numbers look pretty good for Toronto against righties, when you look at the game logs, it's really just 2 games. Which brings us to Marcus Stroman, and just like Kikuchi against the Yankees, Stroman's been great against the Blue Jays this year. He's pitched against them twice already. 11 1/3 innings pitched, 159 ERA and a 106 whip. So he's had no problem with this Toronto lineup. Now, his last 2 starts, he does have a 5.40 ERA and a 4.76 expected FIP. And if you look at his expected FIP on the season, it indicates that he's had a lot of good luck. I mean, 5.40 in his last 6 starts. You look at his road starts, again, look at those expected FIP numbers, way up there, indicating he should be giving up a lot more runs than he is. Here are his game logs, and I mean, they really don't look that bad, especially when you take into account the lineups that he saw. The Braves, they've been hitting. At Fenway, tough place to pitch, especially mid-June. The Red Sox were scorching hot. Before that, on the road in Kansas City, that was back in early June when the Royals were still hitting at home. Twins were red hot in early June. So although the expected FIP numbers look terrible, last 4 starts, definitely some shaky numbers. When you actually look at the situations he was in, I really don't think it's that bad. And if you scroll back before that, I mean, he pitched great in San Francisco, pitched great in San Diego. And we have to mention that his 2 main pitches are the sinker and the cutter, and Toronto's got terrible numbers against those 2 pitches, 25th and 29th in the last 30 days. So I know a lot of people are down on Marcus Stroman right now, but he's pitched great against this Toronto lineup. I think the Blue Jays' offensive numbers are skewed a bit, looking like they're doing better than they are. I think he's going to be fine. I like Stroman to pitch a good game here. As far as the bullpen matchup, I mean, this is crazy that Toronto has the bullpen edge here. The Yankees bullpen is in a free fall. In the last 30 days, this is a bottom 5 bullpen, even worse than that in the last 14 days. And Toronto's bullpen has actually been pretty good. I can't even believe I'm saying that because that bullpen was so dreadful for most of the season. But Toronto's bullpen, last 30 days, last 14 days, significantly better than the Yankees bullpen. And offensively against bullpens, it's even close now. I mean, the last 14 days, last 30 days, obviously Yankees. Look at the last 7 days. Actually, Toronto's been slightly better. So as far as the late innings, I don't even know if I'd give the Yankees the edge right now. As far as betting this game, I mean, this is such a wild card. I think it's safe to say we need to pump the brakes on laying juice with the Yankees. I mean, they're 1-7 in their last 8 games. Kikuchi has historically dominated the Yankees. Yankees have also been better against righty starters this year. I mean, I think the overall safest bet here would be play the under at 8.5, but this is almost definitely going to be a pass for me. Next up, it's Grimace time. Houston on the road in Citi Field to play the Mets. Mets are dogs at home, plus 105, total sitting at 8.5. Ronel Blanco pitching for the Astros, Jose Quintana pitching for the Mets. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we got a slight lean on Houston after 5 innings, 3.21 to 3.03, 4.89 to 5.57 Mets, though, final score. So model likes the Mets late. Before we get into this one, let's take a look at some ROI numbers, and as I'm sure you've heard, these are 2 of the hottest lineups in baseball. Mets are actually positive ROI on the season now, plus 0.6%. But in the last 10 games, both these teams have been very profitable. The Astros have won 7 straight, and the Mets are, I think, 12-2 in the last 14, something like that. Now, normally, I would say, hey, the Mets at home, be careful. But the Mets have been winning anywhere, on the road, at home. In fact, in the last 5 games, the Mets have an ROI above 100%, plus 101.8%. Astros have been slightly profitable on the road as well in the last 10 games. So let's get into this matchup. And we'll start with Quintana, who's been, I mean, pretty hit or miss. His numbers on the season are average, 4.58 ERA, 132 whip. His numbers in his last 7 starts, slightly better than that. Last 2 starts, 0.73 ERA and an 0.73 whip. His numbers at home looking pretty average, 3.49 ERA, 119 whip at home on the year. Last 5 home starts, last 2 home starts, again, looking pretty average. Here are his game logs, and you can see 2 great starts in a row. Cubs and Padres, blanked them both. Before that, he had a really rough stretch. 4 games in a row where Quintana struggled. I mean, he wasn't getting absolutely crushed. In fact, that May 22nd start against Cleveland isn't even bad. Just 4 base runners in 6 innings pitched. Start against the Dodgers isn't even bad either. 8 base runners in 6 innings pitched. The Arizona and the Philly starts on June 2nd and June 9th. Those are the 2 bad ones. Other than that, Quintana's been pretty solid, man. And also, he's pitched against a lot of really good lineups. Look at this. Against top 10 lineups versus lefties, he's thrown 40 in the 3rd innings pitch, and he struggled. Look at his numbers. 5.80 ERA, 139 whip. Against bottom 10 lineups versus lefties, just 14 in the 3rd innings pitched. So the guy's definitely had a bit of a rough shake when it comes to the teams he's seen. And I got some good news for Quintana as far as his pitch mix. Sinker and curveball, those are his 2 main pitches, and the Astros are bottom 10 in baseball against both those pitches in the last 30 days. So there's something. But now we get over to the Houston bats, and they are definitely hitting. In the last 30 days, 11th, 10th, and 11th. Last 14 days, last 7 days are even better than that. But here's the thing. They're on the road against the lefty, and those are the worst splits for the Astros this season. I mean, you could see in the last 30 days, they're actually a borderline bottom 10 lineup on the road. In the last 14 days, it looks better. It's a small sample size. Look at their numbers against left-handed pitching. In the last 30 days, this is a borderline bottom 10 lineup against lefties. That being said, they have gotten to lefty starters recently. The last 4 lefty starters they've seen, 6.38 ERA and a 1.58 whip. Here are the game logs. I mean, they got Ty Block. Ty Block, that was actually a bullpen appearance. He came in the 8th inning, so that shouldn't be on here. They got to Austin Gomber, got to Garrett Crochet, who no one is getting to that kid. Astros did. They got to Scooble. There's some good names on this list that they got to. But then before that, if you rewind back to closer to early June, couldn't get to Kyle Harrison. Before that, they got to Sandoval and Tyler Anderson. So overall, the Astros have been getting to lefty starters. I guess it's lefty arms out of the bullpen that has given them problems. So do I trust Quintana to pitch well against this Astros lineup? Not really. I think they get a few runs on him. On the other side, we got Ronel Blanco, and he's been excellent. On the season, he's got a 2.34 ERA, 0.97 whip. Look at his last 5 starts, last 3 starts. This dude's been close to unhittable. He's also been elite on the road. His last 6 road starts, 1.98 ERA and a 1.02 whip. Last 4 road starts, last 2 road starts. Everything looks great here. Here is game logs, and I mean, other than the Cardinals and Twins on May 31st and June 5th, those 2 starts back-to-back, other than those 2 starts, he's blanking everyone he's seen, including the Baltimore Orioles, 7 innings, just 1 run. It's one of the best lineups in baseball against righties. He threw a gem. So yeah, Blanco's been the man this year, but he's running into a brick wall because now we talk about the Mets lineup, which is the hottest lineup in baseball. They are first across the board in the last 30 days, the last 14 days, the last 7 days. The Mets are crushing the ball recently. And remember early in the season where the Mets are struggling at home? That's in the past because this is a top 10, maybe even top 5 lineup at home recently. In the last 30 days, 3rd, 4th, and 4th. In the last 14 days, arguably the best in baseball. Against right-handed pitching, again, probably the hottest lineup in baseball. Top 5 in the last 30 days, but the last 14 days, the last 7 days, first across the board. The last 3 righty starters to pitch against the Mets have a 10.66 ERA and a 2.13 whip. Same goes for the last 8 righty starters. If you look at the game logs, I mean, these aren't even bad names. Luis Gil, they crushed him. Crushed Garrett Cole. Crushed Javier Assad. Weirdly, they didn't get to Tyone and Michael Lorenzen in there. It was like a weird stretch in the June 22nd and June 18th where they didn't get to those 2 guys. Then before that, they absolutely tattooed John Gray. So I'm sure this isn't news to anyone. The Mets lineup, one of the hottest in baseball, and they have great numbers against Blanco's pitch mix. His main pitches are the 4-seam fastball, the slider, and the changeup. The Mets 2nd, 7th, and 1st against those 3 pitches in the last 30 days. And Blanco actually has looked vulnerable against good lineups. He's thrown 23 innings pitched this season against top 10 lineups versus righties. He's got a 4.30 ERA and a 1.22 whip in those innings. So he's definitely been more vulnerable when he's pitched against good lineups, and the Mets right now are about as good as it gets. So as good as Blanco's been, as good as his numbers look on the road, I can't fade these Mets bats right now. I expect them to score runs. As far as the bullpen matchup, you got to give the edge to the Mets based on these numbers. Full season, last 30 days, last 14 days, the Mets numbers all look slightly better. Keep in mind the Mets are still missing Edwin Diaz, so they're missing an arm, but as a whole, the Astros bullpen has been nothing special. Weirdly, though, the Astros bullpen has been somehow elite on the road. See, in the last 30 days, they're actually a top 5 bullpen, and the Mets bullpen at home hasn't been quite as good. I usually don't include home-away splits for bullpens, but I thought this was interesting, so I threw it in there. As far as offenses against bullpens, these are 2 of the hottest lineups in baseball. In the last 14 days, the Mets are 1st, 2nd, and 1st. The Astros are 4th, 5th, and 5th. So both of these lineups have been very good in the late innings. As far as betting this game, I mean, it's hard to step in front of either of these teams right now. Might be the 2 hottest teams in baseball. but I'm getting the home team at plus money. You know I'm rolling with Grimace. Mets money line. Next up, we got San Diego on the road in Boston. Red Sox are minus 155 favorites at home. Total sitting at 9.5. Randy Vasquez is pitching for the Padres. Nick Pivetta on the mound for the Bo Sox. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet. And according to the model, we got to lean on Boston. 2.49 to 3.31 Sox after 5 innings. 4.33 to 5.49 Sox final score. So before we get into this matchup, let's look at some ROI numbers. Red Sox are now positive on the season, a plus 4% ROI. The last 10 games plus 59.3%. So if you've been betting the Red Sox, you've been making some money. But you know what? Same goes for the Padres. Padres have a plus 33.3% ROI in the last 10 games. Red Sox have also been profitable at home recently, which was not the case earlier in the season. April and May, they were terrible at home, plus 22% ROI in the last 10 games. Meanwhile, all the Padres profits, they've been coming at home because on the road in the last 10 games, they have a minus 78.2% ROI. So let's go ahead and look at this matchup. We'll start with the Padres bats, and they have great numbers. In the last 30 days, 6th in WRC+, 7th in OPS, 7th in WOBA. Last 14 days, last 7 days, numbers look solid. Same goes for their numbers against right-handed pitching. In fact, in the last 30 days against righties, they're one of the best lineups in baseball. Second, and second. Same goes for the last 14 days. They look solid. Last 7 days, they look great. But now we look at the Padres' numbers on the road, and you can see most of the damage they've done recently has been at home. In the last 30 days, this is a bottom 6, bottom 7 lineup on the road. Last 14 days, same thing. And it's weird because earlier in the season, it was the opposite. The Padres couldn't hit at home, and they were actually scoring a lot of runs on the road. It's flipped. Now they can't seem to score on the road, and they're scoring runs at home. They have been getting to righty starters, but again, a lot of these are going to be at home. You can see the last 5 righty starters to pitch against the Padres, 5.54 ERA. Last 3 righty starters, 6.60 ERA. Here are the game logs. Kind of hit or miss here. They didn't get to Tobias Myers at all. 5 innings pitched, just 1 earned run. But before that, they smoked Colin Rea, smoked Bryce Wilson. Then before that, didn't really get to Aaron Nola, didn't get to Tyler McGill, but then crushed Joey Estes and Ryan Nelson. So definitely hit or miss here for the Padres bats against righty starters. So how do they fare against Nick Pivetta? Well, Nick Pivetta was having a great season. On the year, he's got a 4.06 ERA and a 1.16 whip. In his last 3 starts, though, 5.87 ERA and a 1.76 whip. Now, most of his problems have come on the road, which is good news because this one's in Fenway. His last 3 home starts still look great. 3.31 ERA and a 1.10 whip. Here are his game logs, and you can see, 3 starts in a row. 2 of them were on the road. He struggled in Cincinnati. This Toronto start isn't that bad. He allowed 10 base runners and 3 earned runs, but he did go 7 innings. So that start in Toronto really isn't that bad. But his last home start against the Phillies, they crushed him. But then look at the start right before that. 7 shutout innings against the Braves. So really hot or cold here for Nick Pivetta. I'm a little concerned that it's been since June 5th since we've seen him pitch a good game. I don't like the look of that. Also, Nick Pivetta's really struggled against top 10 lineups. He's only thrown 13 1/3 innings pitched, so we're talking about a small sample size, but a 6.75 ERA and a 1.58 whip. As we just saw, the Padres against righties are most definitely a top 10 lineup right now. In fact, they're probably a top 5. So I don't like the look of that. Also, the Padres have great numbers against his pitch mix. His main pitches are the 4-seam fastball, the slider, and the curveball. Padres are top 10 against all 3 of those pitches in the last 30 days. So as a whole, as much as I'd love to say, hey, the Padres aren't hitting on the road, this is a perfect bounce back spot for Nick Pivetta, I'm not sure if I feel that way. I think there's more evidence pointing towards the Padres scoring runs on Pivetta here. On the other side, we got the Boston bats, and in the last 30 days, the numbers look solid, 7th, 5th, and 5th, but are the Red Sox bats cooling off? Because look at their numbers in the last 7 days, starting to look kind of average. Numbers at home look fine. In the last 30 days, this is a top 10 lineup at home, 9th, 6th, and 6th. Look at their numbers against right-handed pitching, though. Last 30 days, top 10 lineup versus righties, but look at the last 7 days, 23rd, 19th, and 19th. So again, are the Red Sox bats cooling down? The last 3 righty starters that pitch against the Red Sox, 3.21 ERA and an 0.93 whip. So we're talking about 3 righty starters in a row that Boston has failed to get to. And look at the game logs here. So Yariel Rodriguez, obviously that game was suspended due to weather. So we can just eliminate that one. But before that, didn't really get to Kevin Gausman. Didn't really get to Chris Bassett. Actually didn't get to Chris Bassett at all. Didn't get to Frankie Montas. So we're talking about 3 righty starters in a row that Boston didn't get to. Don't like the look of that. But I may have the cure to Boston's hitting problems. His name is Randy Vasquez, and my man's struggling here. His last 2 starts, 5.79 ERA is impractical joke bad, but a 2.36 whip. This guy cannot stop letting guys on base. His last 2 road starts, he's got an 8.68 ERA, a 6.85 ERA on the road this season. Here are his game logs. He was able to hold Milwaukee to 5 shutout innings, even though he allowed 8 base runners. Phillies crushed him. He was okay against Oakland, Arizona. I mean, he was okay against Arizona. Royals gave him problems. Braves crushed him. Rockies crushed him. Vasquez has some ugly-looking numbers here, although when you look at his game logs, you can see there was a couple instances where he was able to pitch well, but now we get to his righty-lefty splits, and this is just nuts. Look at Randy Vasquez's numbers against lefty bats this year. 5.33 WOBA and a 2.93 whip. Holy shit. That's terrible. I mean, he has terrible numbers against lefty bats. Want to know how many lefties are projected to be in the lineup for the Boston Red Sox? 7. 7 lefties in this lineup, and look at his splits. That is terrifying if you plan on backing the Padres here. Now, his main pitches are the four-seam fastball and the curveball. Boston, actually not the greatest looking numbers against those pitches, 17th and 14th in the last 30 days. So I guess there's something if you're looking to back Randy Vasquez, but all those lefties, I got to think the Red Sox are able to get to him. As far as the bullpen matchup, got to give the edge to the Red Sox here. The Padres bullpen was great earlier in the season. It's completely fallen off. In the last 30 days, they're 27th in ERA, 29th in WOBA. Red Sox hovering around the bottom of the top 10, somewhere in there. Red Sox bullpen has been pretty solid for most of this year. Offensively against bullpens, kind of a wash. Both of these offenses have done a great job scoring runs in the late innings, so really nothing to go by there. Both of the offenses have been great in the late innings. On paper, the Red Sox should score at least 5 or 6 runs in this game, so I have to lean towards Boston, but I'm not trying to lay minus 150, minus 155, especially when I think the Padres might get to Pavetta. So unfortunately, I think this game has to be a pass for me. I do like the over, but it's all the way up at 9.5. So it's just going to be over a pass for me in this one. Next up is Rockies White Sox. I actually skipped this game. It's 2 of the worst teams in the league, and it's an AL versus... Not only is it 2 of the worst teams in the league, but it's a meaningless series too, so probably won't be betting this series. Let's skip to the next game, which is Pirates on the road in Atlanta. Braves are minus 175 favorites at home. Total sitting at 8.5. Jared Jones is on the mound for the Pirates. Charlie Morton pitching for the Braves. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we got to lean on Atlanta. 3.35 to 2.7 after 5 innings. Final score 5.44 to 4.33. Before we get into this one, let's look at some ROI numbers. These two teams actually similar. Pirates are minus 6.9% ROI on the season. Braves are minus 5%. And both these teams have been profitable in the last 10 games, plus 13.3% for Pittsburgh, plus 9.9% for the Braves. As far as home and away, Braves have been slightly profitable at home this year, and the Pirates have been slightly not profitable. But it's pretty close across the board. So let's take a look at this matchup. We'll start with Pittsburgh's bats. As we know, this is not a lineup we fear. In the last 30 days, this is a bottom 6, bottom 7 lineup, 25th, 24th, and 25th. Numbers in the last 14 days, last 7 days look pretty similar to that. Now, when we look at their numbers on the road, they are up at 7th in the last 14 days, but it's pretty much just 3 games that are skewing that. That series in Cincinnati, they were able to score some runs. As a whole, the Pirates are not a lineup that hits on the road. They did score some runs in the Cincinnati series, and same goes for the numbers against right-handed pitching. Pirates in the last 30 days are a bottom 10 lineup versus righties, but if you look at the last 7 days, it looks better than that. Again, pretty much just from that Cincinnati series. Same goes for their numbers against righty starters. I mean, the last 6 righty starters to pitch against the Pirates, 6.46 ERA, but if you look at the game logs, it's pretty much just the Cincinnati series and Pepio. They did get to Pepio back on June 21st. They got to Ashcraft, Hunter Green, got to Carson Spears a little bit, not really. Didn't get to Savale, and they didn't get to Zach Eflin. I know they scored 4 runs, but he went 7 innings and only allowed 6 base runners. That's a great start. So as a whole, I think the numbers are skewed a little bit for the Pirates. This is not a lineup I trust, despite what the numbers say. They're matched up against Charlie Morton, and this is weird. I was surprised to see this. Charlie Morton's only made 1 career start against the Pirates. Back in 2022, 6 innings pitched, 12 strikeouts, but he did allow 4 runs. It was 2 years ago, though, so who cares? As far as Charlie Morton's numbers, he's got a 4.20 ERA and 1.30 whip on the season. Last 5 starts, last 2 starts, I mean, those are pretty on par from what we expect from Charlie Morton at this point in his career. His last 2 home starts actually were really good. 0.75 ERA and an 0.92 whip. But when you pull up the game logs and look at who those starts were against, Tampa and Oakland. He blanked the Rays at home, blanked Oakland at home. So, I mean, okay, solid, but when he's seen good lineups, he's gotten crushed. And actually, the Nats have rocked him twice in a row. I mentioned how his last 2 home starts were good, but look at the one before that. May 27th against the Nats, 5 2/3 innings, 12 hits, 8 runs. So, I mean, he's been great at home the last 2 starts, but the Nats crushed him at home kind of recently. Well, it's actually about a month ago now. One thing I will say, this is kind of weird, Charlie Morton, 10.54% walk rate. So Charlie Morton struggling with walks, but the Pirates have weirdly been terrible against righties with a walk rate above 8%. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I just thought it was interesting enough to share. As far as Charlie Morton's pitch mix, Pirates don't hit the curveball or the fastball. Those are his main 2 pitches. So definitely don't like that for Pittsburgh. Overall, I'm not a big Charlie Morton guy, but really not big on this Pirates lineup. So Charlie Morton should pitch fine. As far as the Braves bats, I mean, last 30 days, this is a borderline bottom 10 lineup, 21st, 20th, and 21st. Now, they are at home, and they're against the lefty, which is great news. The Braves have pretty shitty numbers against right-handed pitching, and they have pretty shitty numbers on the road. But at home, you can see, this is a top 10 lineup at home this year, and the last 30 days, 12th, 11th, and 12th. So even when the Braves were going through that slump, they were still able to score runs at home. It's on the road where they've been terrible. And against left-handed pitching, same thing. I mean, it's not elite, but their numbers against righties, they're like bottom 5, bottom 6 lineup in baseball. That's not the case against lefties. They've always been able to hit lefties, at least somewhat. You can see here, the last 3 lefty starters to pitch against the Braves, an 8.59 ERA and a 1.84 whip. So they've had no problem getting to lefty starters. Now, if we pull up the game logs, you can see they didn't get to Nestor Cortez, but they crushed Carlos Rodon, and they crushed Tariq Skubal. Those are 2 of the better lefties in baseball, and the Braves rocked those guys. Before that, they crushed Cole Irvin, too. So I trust this Braves lineup against lefties. I don't really trust them so much against righties, but against lefties, I think we can count on this lineup, which brings us to Martin Perez, and who knows what to expect from this guy. You can see his last 3 starts. Numbers look terrible. 8.76 ERA, 2.11 whip. His last road start, 16.20 ERA. His last 2 road starts, 7.36. I mean, terrible numbers across the board. But here's the thing. He hasn't pitched in a month. His last start was May 26th. It was against the Braves, and they crushed him. 6 base runners in 3 innings. They just scored 1 run, but 6 base runners in 3 innings. So, I mean, I don't see any reason to trust Martin Perez here. I mean, I guess you can point at the pitch mix. There's a sinker, the cutter, and the changeup. The Braves, not great numbers against those pitches, but still, the Braves have been hitting at home. They've been hitting lefties. He hasn't pitched in a month. I really don't know what to think about that. I expect the Braves to score runs on him. As far as the bullpen matchup, very one-sided. No question the Braves have the much better bullpen here. Full season, last 30 days, last 14 days, you name it. Braves bullpen, much better than the Pirates. Offensively against bullpens, though, it's a wash. Both these units are ass. In the last 30 days, the Braves slightly better, I guess, but neither of these offenses have done a great job scoring runs in the late innings. As far as betting this game, here's the thing. I hate this spot for the Braves. They played a doubleheader against the Cardinals, 18 innings, then immediately flew to Chicago to play the White Sox once, 1 game, then immediately fly to Pittsburgh to play the Pirates. The Pirates just had a day off. So based on the spot, it would only be Pirates for me here, but I have zero faith in Martin Perez. I think he could absolutely get crushed. So I also don't have a ton of faith in the Pirates lineup. So it'll be Pirates or pass for me, but I think there's a really good chance I don't bet this game. Next up, we got Cleveland on the road in Kansas City. Royals are dogs at home here, plus 105. Total sitting at 9.5. Tristan McKenzie is on the mound for Cleveland. Alec Marsh pitching for the Royals. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet. And according to the model, we got a slight lean on Cleveland after 5 innings, 3.02 to 2.81, and a slight lean on Cleveland final score. Actually, a pretty solid lean on Cleveland final score, 5.52 to 4.08. So before we get into this one, let's look at some ROI numbers. Cleveland definitely been more profitable. The Royals were right up there. And in fact, there was a time where Kansas City and Cleveland were the 2 most profitable teams in baseball. You could see if you've been betting Kansas City, you've been giving all of your winnings back. In the last 10 games, the Royals have a minus 40% ROI. So let's go ahead and look at the matchup. Cleveland's bats, as we know, top 5, top 10 all year. Last 30 days, 5th, 6th, and 6th. As far as on the road, they've been solid all year. Top 10 on the season, top 5 in the last 30 days. Against right-handed pitching, same story. Last 30 days, 3rd in WRC+, 3rd in OPS, 3rd in WOBA. So Cleveland can hit at home, they can hit on the road, and they can hit right-handed pitching. Last 6 righty starters to pitch against Cleveland, 6.58 ERA, 1.38 whip. Here are the game logs. Actually, they didn't get to Grayson Rodriguez, who was the last righty that they saw, but before that, Barrios, Yariel Rodriguez, Louis Castillo, Brian Wu, Bryce Miller, Jose Barrios again. I mean, you name it. Cleveland crushed them. Righty starters have really had trouble pitching against this Cleveland team, which brings us to Alec Marsh. And bad news, not only is Cleveland red hot, but Alec Marsh has had real problems with this team. He's made 2 career starts against Cleveland. He's got an even 9 ERA and a 2.14 whip. So he's really struggled against Cleveland, and he's really struggling lately. In his last 6 starts, Alec Marsh has a 6.61 ERA. Not looking good there. I guess you could say he's been slightly better at home, but still, he's got a 4.70 ERA in his last 4 home starts. Not really anything to go by there. Here are his game logs. This dude got crushed in back-to-back games, but they were both on the road, so there's something. Got crushed in Texas, got crushed in Oakland. A little scary there, considering those are some pretty bad lineups. Now, you can point at the home start June 13th. That's his last home start. 7 shutout innings against the Yankees. So you could say, Kyle, this is a home game. His last home start, he was excellent. Okay, that's fair, but look at the 3 home starts before that. Struggled against Seattle, got crushed by the Padres, struggled against Detroit. So you're not going to try to sell me that Alec Marsh is good at home because of one game, when the 3 home starts before that, he wasn't very good. So don't have a ton of faith in Alec Marsh here. As far as his pitch mix, his main pitches are the 4-seam fastball, the slider, and the curveball. Cleveland top 10 against 2 out of those 3. As a whole on this side, I don't see any reason to doubt the Cleveland bats. They've been one of the most consistent lineups all year. I'm sure they get to Alec Marsh. On the other side, we got the Kansas City bats, and brace yourself, it gets ugly. In the last 14 days, this is the worst lineup in baseball. 30th, 30th, and 30th. Remember when the Royals were just this unstoppable force at home, one of the most dangerous home lineups in baseball? Yeah, that's in the past. In the last 14 days, this is a bottom 10 home lineup. Against right-handed pitching, same thing. Last 14 days, one of the worst lineups in baseball. The last 10 righty starters to pitch against the Royals, 2.14 ERA and an 0.95 whip. That's terrible. They have not been touching righty starters. And then you pull up the game logs and look. They got to Roddery Munoz on June 24th. Other than that, the Royals have not touched a righty starter. So Kansas City really struggling offensively. They're in such a mega slump right now. But I have good news for the Royals. I give you the slump breaker. Tristan McKenzie just... wow. In his last 2 starts, he's got an 11.81 ERA, 2.63 whip. Last 5 starts, he's got a 7.71 ERA. His last 2 starts on the road, well, he's actually been better on the road. So if you're looking to back McKenzie, you can say, hey, he's actually been somewhat decent on the road, and that's true. His last 3 road starts, he's got a 3.71 ERA and 1.29 whip. So there's something for McKenzie. Here are his game logs. You can see 5 of his last 7 starts have been at home. Okay, so he hasn't gotten to pitch on the road much. There's something. And look at his last road start in Cincinnati. It's a good start. 5 1/3 innings pitched, just 2 earned runs, 6 base runners. That's solid. His only other road start on here was at Coors Field, and that's Coors Field. You can't take anything away from that. So, I mean, Tristan McKenzie has been awful, but you can say all of his struggles have been at home. Because if you just look at his road starts, they actually look pretty good with the exception of Coors Field. There's something. It's reaching, but it's something. Also, if you're looking to back Tristan McKenzie here, you can say he has better numbers against lefty bats, which is true. He actually has a 135 whip against lefties. That's pretty solid. Kansas City, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lefties in the lineup. Again, this is kind of thin, might be reaching, but there are a couple favorable angles here for Tristan McKenzie if you're looking to play him. Also, his main pitch by far, the 4-seam fastball. He throws it 52.5% of the time. Kansas City, 29th in baseball against the 4-seam fastball in the last 30 days. Look, am I going to sit here and tell you Tristan McKenzie is going to throw a good game? No, but I will say there is some evidence on the board that he might. That's all I'll say. As far as the bullpen matchup, not even close. One of the best bullpens in baseball against one of the worst. Cleveland by a mile. Offensively against bullpens, though, Cleveland has cooled down. The Royals are even worse than that, but Cleveland is not destroying bullpens like they were earlier in the season. But no question, late innings, edge goes to the Guardians. As far as betting this game, I'm definitely on the Guardians. I already bet Cleveland. I did have Cleveland last night. It was my only loss, but I did say it was one of my lighter bets because I didn't love the spot for Cleveland flying in immediately after that series against Baltimore. Now the Guardians bullpen has 2 full days rest. MacArthur's pitched 2 nights in a row for the Royals and 3 of the last 4. So even if Kansas City does have the lead, not really sure who's going to close out the game. Maybe Schreiber. And the Guardians just saw him earlier tonight. So definitely a Cleveland spot for me. I'm on the Guardians. Next up, we got the Cubbies on the road in Milwaukee. Brewers are favored here at home, -135. Total sitting at 8.5. We got Jameson Taillon on the mound for the Cubs, Colin Rea pitching for the Brewers. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we got to lean on Milwaukee, 2.64 to 2.82 after 5 innings, 4.33 to 5.18 final score. So let's take a look at the ROI numbers before we get into this one. Milwaukee's been much more profitable than the Cubs this year, plus 11.65% on the season. Cubs are down 8.3%. And then when you take into consideration this game's in Milwaukee, it gets even worse than that because the Brewers have been a great home team this year, plus 17.52%, one of the most profitable home teams in baseball, and the Cubs on the road have been a disaster, minus 22% ROI on the road. So based on the ROI numbers, we should be leaning towards Milwaukee before we even start this one. So let's get into the matchup, and we'll start with Colin Rea, who is having a great season, 3.62 ERA and a 1.24 whip on the year. His last 2 starts, though, a 5.56 ERA and a 5.19 expected FIP. If you take a look at the game logs, I mean, it's really just one start on the road in San Diego, 5 runs and 5 1/3 innings of work. Before that was a start against Cincinnati and was actually good. So it was really just one start that's skewing the numbers. And if you're looking at these game logs, you should notice a bit of a pattern here. All 3 of the home starts on here are awesome. Against the Reds, 6 innings, 2 earned runs, 5 base runners. Against the Blue Jays, 7 innings, just 1 earned run, 3 base runners. That's a gem. Before that, Cubs, 5 1/3 innings, 6 base runners, just 1 earned run. So this Cubs team already came into Milwaukee May 30th, tried to hit off Colin Rea and couldn't do it. So that's a good sign. And if we look at Rea's numbers specifically at home, they look excellent. On the season, he's got a 2.76 ERA and an 0.97 whip at home. His last 3 home starts even better than that. So Rea's been a beast at home. The question is, will he be able to blank this Cubs lineup again? And the numbers point to probably. Yeah, I mean, in the last 30 days, Cubs are 17th, 17th, and 17th. Last 14 days, last 7 days, even worse than that. Their numbers on the road, I mean, this has been a borderline bottom 10 road lineup this year. Same goes for last 30 days, last 14 days, maybe slightly better, but not really. Against right-handed pitching, same story. Slightly below average last 30 days. Bottom 10 lineup against righties in the last 14 days. Now, if you look at the righty starters they've seen recently, they did get to 3 of them. But, I mean, Hayden Birdsong, Randy Rodriguez, Tyler McGill. The only legitimate starter they've seen here is Severino, and they didn't touch him. Severino threw 6 shutout innings against the Cubs. As far as Rea's pitch mix, he throws a sinker, cutter, slider, and 4-seam fastball. The Cubs are pretty average against all those pitches, so really nothing to go by there. Something I like for Colin Rea here is he's a contact guy. He's not a strikeout guy. On the season, 15.56% strikeout rate. Cubs this season against righties with a strikeout rate below 19%, one of the worst lineups in baseball. So that's a nice look there for Colin Rea. He does have some shaky-looking splits against lefty bats. 352 WOBA and 142 WHIP. Could be a concern, but it's not like the Cubs have a lefty-heavy lineup. 4 lefties projected to be in the lineup for the Cubs, so really not worried about that either. And then some good news for Colin Rea. He has dominated this Cubs lineup. He's made 2 starts against the Cubs in the last 2 years, and he's got a 0.87 ERA and an 0.77 whip in those 2 starts. So he's had no problems with this team in the past. I expect him to pitch well here. He's been great at home. Cubs can't hit. I like the spot for Colin Rea. On the other side, we got Jameson Taillon, and weirdly, he has pitched really well in the last 3 starts, and wait till you see against who. So on the season, Jameson Taillon's having a good season. 2.90 ERA, 1.27 whip, 4.29 expected FIP. Look at the last 3 starts. 1.42 ERA, 1.05 whip. Look at his last 3 road starts. 3.06 ERA, 1.25 whip. So Jameson Taillon's been pitching well. Look against who. Now, 6 shutout innings in Tampa on June 11th doesn't impress me. But a solid start against the Cardinals, who, by the way, have been heating up against righties. And then he pitched a gem against the Mets. In case you haven't heard, the Mets have one of the hottest, if not the hottest lineup in baseball right now. So Taillon, yeah, if you scroll back farther than that, back to early June into late May, yeah, he was getting hit up a little bit. But as a whole, Taillon's been pretty solid this year. He's definitely going to have his hands full in this one, though, because Milwaukee's been a solid lineup. They're especially a solid lineup at home. In the last 30 days, the Brewers' bats are pretty average across the board. And yeah, they have been cooling off at home, but on the season, this is a top 10, maybe even a top 5 lineup at home. 7th, 6th, and 3rd on the season at home. Against right-handed pitching, pretty average recently. 14th, 13th, and 13th in the last 30 days. So really not setting the world on fire against righties, but if you rewind about a month ago, they were one of the more dangerous lineups against righties. They just haven't been recently. The good news is they are still getting to righty starters. The last 7 righties to start a game against the Brewers, 5.66 ERA and a 1.54 whip. If you look at the game logs, they got to Eovaldi. Andrew Heaney shouldn't be on this list. He's a lefty. They didn't get to Michael Lorenzen, didn't really get to Randy Vasquez, which is weird But they got to every other name on this list. I mean, Dylan Cease, they crushed him. They crushed Griffin Canning, got to Michael King, crushed Eovaldi. So overall, yeah, there are a couple righties that were able to pitch well against Milwaukee, but this is a lineup that usually gives righty starters problems. Now, some bad news for the Brewers is Taillon's actually pitched well against Milwaukee. Since September 30th of last year, he's pitched against his team 3 times. He's 1-0 with a 169 ERA and an 094 whip. So, yeah, we just talked about how the Brewers have given righty starters problems. Not this righty starter. I mean, he's been great against the Brewers. And Taillon's been weirdly awesome against good lineups. The weirdest splits ever. Check this out. Against top 10 lineups versus righties, Taillon's got a 2.27 ERA and a 1.15 whip. He's actually been terrible against bad lineups. So explain that one. Taillon, I don't know if he just rises in big spots or I don't know. But he's been great in these tough spots. On the road in Milwaukee, that's a tough spot. So I really don't know what to think on that side. On the other side, I'm pretty confident Colin Rea could pitch a good game. But as far as Taillon against the Brewers bats, feels kind of coin flippy, to be honest. As far as the bullpen battle, definitely Milwaukee, and it's not close. Cubs bullpen has been pretty terrible. Bottom 10 bullpen on the season, bottom 10 bullpen in the last 30 days, and Cubs bullpen has been especially bad on the road. On the season, this is a bottom 3 bullpen in the league on the road. Meanwhile, the Brewers bullpen has been excellent at home. So no question, huge bullpen edge for the Brewers. And offensively against bullpens, it's a little closer to even, but still, edge goes to Milwaukee. So regardless of what you think about Jameson Taillon against the Brewers bats, or what you think about Colin Rea against the Cubs bats, no question the Brewers have the edge in the late innings. As far as betting this game, I mean, it has to be Milwaukee here. You got the Cubs coming off the extra inning win in San Francisco earlier today. No days off, immediately flying to play the Brewers. Colin Rea should pitch well. I'm a little worried about Taillon. That's why I haven't placed this bet yet, because Taillon keeps showing up and pitching these awesome games against playoff lineups. It makes no sense. So I am a little worried about Taillon. But the Brewers should definitely have the advantage in the late innings. Their bullpen's been much better. I think minus 135 is a short enough price for me to get involved. So I haven't placed it yet, but I'm strongly considering Brewers money line in this one. I actually skipped the next 3 games. Reds, Cardinals, A's, Diamondbacks, Tigers, Angels. I skipped all 3 of them. We had limited time. We got to as many as we could. I didn't get to those 3. Next up, we got Minnesota on the road in Seattle. Mariners are favored at home here, minus 130. Total sitting at 7.5. We got Bailey Ober pitching for the Twins against Logan Gilbert for Seattle. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet. And according to the model, we got a lean on the Mariners after 5 innings, 2.41 to 2.57. And we got a very slight lean on the Mariners' final score, 4.32 to 4.40. So before we get into this one, let's look at some ROI numbers. Both these teams about even on the year. Twins slightly below 0, Mariners slightly above 0. The fact that this game's in Seattle is significant, though, because the Mariners have been extremely profitable at home this year, plus 21% ROI at home on the season. Last 10 games, last 5 games. Betting the Mariners at home has been a very good call this year. So let's go ahead and take a look at this matchup, and we'll start with the Twins bats, and everything looks great here. As we know, you rewind about a week and a half, this was the hottest lineup in the world before the Mets took that crown. But in the last 30 days, last 14 days, last 7 days, the Twins are top 3 across the board. On the road, same thing. This is a top 10 road lineup on the season, top 10 road lineup in the last 30 days. Against right-handed pitching, same thing. In the last 30 days, top 5. Last 14 days, top 5. So this Twins lineup, definitely excellent looking numbers. The last 7 righty starters to pitch against the Twins, an ERA above 7, a whip above 170. So they've been getting to righty starters. And now we pull up the game logs, and this is where it gets a little confusing, because I was talking about this on the live show. It looked like the Twins lineup was about to cool off, because they were crushing starters back in mid-June. But then it came to Taj Bradley. He was able to pitch all right. Then Zach Littell was able to put together a decent game. Then Joey Estes pitched a decent game. And I was like, all right, this Twins lineup definitely cooling off. But then they crushed Ryan Nelson. Now, that Brandon Pfaadt start, it looks like they got to him, but they actually didn't do shit against him until the 7th inning. So that's a little misleading. But they crushed Ryan Nelson, who leading up to that game had been pitching really well. So I really don't know what to think about this Twins lineup. I thought they were cooling off, but then they just destroyed Ryan Nelson, who had been good. So will they be able to hit off Logan Gilbert? Well, bad news for Logan Gilbert is he's been terrible against the Twins. On the last 2 years, he's made 2 starts against Minnesota. He's got a 10 ERA and a 2.11 whip. So the Twins have tattooed this guy. That being said, Logan Gilbert has been damn near untouchable. In his last 5 starts, he's got a 2.02 ERA, 0.76 whip. In his last 3 starts, he's got a 1.19 ERA and an 0.57 whip. Unreal. His last 2 starts at home, 1.84 ERA and an 0.55 whip. Look at his game logs. His last 2 starts, both 8-inning shutouts. Back-to-back 8-inning shutouts. This dude hasn't given up a run since June 10th. So yeah, he's been as dominant as it gets. This is arguably the hottest starting pitcher in baseball, but I do question who he's seen. Miami, Texas, the White Sox, the A's. I mean, that's a really, really shaky schedule there. Definitely a little fortunate for Logan Gilbert to be able to pitch against those teams all in a row. I will say that. And then when you look at Logan Gilbert's splits, you can see he's done a lot of his damage against bad lineups. 49 2/3 innings pitched against bottom 10 lineups versus righties, and look at his numbers. He's taken advantage of it. 1.45 ERA and an 0.70 whip in those innings. In the 29 2/3 innings pitched he's thrown against top 10 lineups, he's actually gotten hit up. So is this a sell high spot for Logan Gilbert? When you look at his pitch mix, it kind of looks like yes. I mean, his main pitches, the four-seam fastball and the slider. Twins 6th and 2nd against those pitches. He also throws a cutter. Twins have been great in hitting that pitch as well. So I know Logan Gilbert has been unreal. I think it's a sell high spot for him. I think the Twins might get to him. On the other side, we got the Seattle bats, and things aren't looking great here. In the last 30 days, 18th, 21st, and 20th. In the last 14 days, the last 7 days, even worse than that. At home, I mean, this has been a great home team this year, but not really because of the bats. I mean, on the season, 19th, 28th, and 26th. Last 30 days, last 14 days, not much better. Now, their numbers against right-handed pitching, not quite as bad as their overall numbers. You see in the last 30 days, they're pretty average. Last 14 days, last 7 days, pretty average lineup against righties, but they haven't gotten to righty starters. The last 3 righty starters to pitch against the Mariners, 2.30 ERA and an 0.89 whip. Here are the game logs, and look at this. They're actually 4. The last 4 righty starters. This is concerning. Ryan Pepio, Zach Littell, Taj Bradley, Tanner Bybee. 4 righty starters in a row that have just blanked this Seattle lineup. That's definitely concerning. I mean, not that those are bad starters, but those are not starters that should be completely shutting your lineup down. So I'm not liking that for Seattle. Also, Bailey Ober was very good the last time he pitched against Seattle, which was recently, a month and a half ago. 5 innings pitched, just 3 hits, 2 earned runs. So Bailey Ober pitched well against Seattle the last time he saw him. And Bailey Ober's coming off back-to-back great starts. 1.76 ERA and an 0.78 whip in his last 2 starts. His last 2 starts on the road, 3.95 ERA and an 0.95 whip. So, okay, back-to-back good starts, 2 decent starts on the road. Well, actually, his last start on the road, 2 starts on the road ago wasn't good. His last start on the road, he threw a complete game in Oakland. But before that was a home game in Oakland. And now the numbers in the last 2 starts looking good start to make sense. He pitched back-to-back games against the Oakland Athletics, which, come on. We got to take that with a grain of salt. You can see the start before that. He went on the road in Pittsburgh and actually got hit up. And if you look at his game logs below that, Bailey Ober's not having the great season. He had back-to-back starts against Oakland that are kind of saving his numbers. Overall, Bailey Ober hasn't been that reliable. Good news for Bailey Ober would be Seattle has pretty awful numbers against his pitch mix. 4-seam fastball, the changeup, the cutter, and the slider. So there's something. As a whole, though, even though Seattle's lineup has been so mediocre and not reliable at all, I really don't trust Bailey Ober this year, so I wouldn't be surprised if Seattle gets to him. As far as the bullpen matchup, you got to give the edge to the Twins here. In the last 30 days, the Twins have been, I guess, a top 10 bullpen, and the Mariners have been more average. It's pretty close, though. These 2 bullpens pretty evenly matched. Offensively against bullpens, though, edge definitely goes to Minnesota. This has been a top 10 lineup in the late innings, and the Mariners have been closer to a bottom 10. As far as betting this game, I'm definitely on the over here. I already bet it. I see it as a sell high spot for both starting pitchers. You got Logan Gilbert coming off 4 straight gems against 4 terrible lineups. Bailey Ober coming off back-to-back starts against the Oakland Athletics. I got it at 7. I'm in on the over 7. I think I paid minus 118 juice for it, but definitely on the over here. Next up, Dodgers on the road in San Francisco. Giants are short home dogs here, plus 100. Total sitting at 7.5. We got Landon Knack pitching for the Dodgers. Logan Webb on the mound for the Giants. Let's take a quick look at the spreadsheet, and according to the model, we got to lean on San Francisco through the first 5, 2.27 to 3.08. Slight lean on the Giants' final score as well, 4.20 to 4.84. So let's start with some ROI numbers. These 2 teams pretty much even on the year. Dodgers are minus 4.9% ROI, Giants minus 6.5%, so they're pretty close. But the Dodgers have been profitable on the road, plus 5.5% ROI on the road. Giants have been slightly profitable at home as well. So both of these teams in a favorable spot. Let's go ahead and take a look at the matchup. Dodgers top 5 lineup in the last 30 days. Last 14 days, last 7 days, not quite as impressive, but still, this is the Dodgers, our top half lineup. Same kind of thing with their numbers against righties. In the last 30 days, they're a top 10 lineup against righties, but last 14 days, last 7 days, definitely cooling off a bit. The numbers on the road look great, though. On the season, this is the second best road lineup in baseball. In the last 30 days, top 3. In the last 14 days, top 4. So the numbers on the road look excellent, and they've been getting to righty starters. The last 4 righty starters to pitch against the Dodgers, a 7.06 ERA, 157 whip. Here are the game logs, and I mean, you can see here. You got to go back to Seth Lugo and Michael Lorenzen, June 15th and June 13th. That was that little Dodgers cold streak. Other than that, they've gotten to every single righty starter on this chart. So righty starters have not been a problem for the Dodgers lineup. So will they be able to hit off Logan Webb? Well, Logan Webb's been okay against the Dodgers. Not dominant, but he's been okay. Since 2023, he's made 4 starts against the Dodgers. He's got a 3.18 ERA and a 137 whip, so not bad. And as far as his numbers overall, they're okay. He's having a good season. He's got a 3.16 ERA and a 122 whip. His numbers in the last 5 starts down a little bit, I guess. 4.09 ERA, 115. I mean, expected FIP indicating he's had some bad luck. It's still not quite as good as the Logan Webb we're used to seeing. His numbers at home this year look elite. 2.06 ERA, 1.06 whip, 3.11 expected FIP. And if you look at his game logs, yeah, he just got hit up in St. Louis. But to be honest, I'm more interested in his home starts. And you can see he did struggle a bit in his last 2 home starts. But it's Houston and the Yankees. And you're like, oh, well, who cares? It's the Astros and the Yankees. We're talking about the Dodgers. Dodgers on the road where they've been really good. So I expect the Dodgers to score a few runs on him. And then you look at his pitch mix, and it kind of confirms that. Logan Webb's main pitches are the sinker, the changeup, and the slider. Dodgers are first against sinkers, 14th against the changeup, 5th against the slider in the last 30 days. So tough matchup for Logan Webb, but he's familiar with this Dodgers lineup. If there's one guy that's a veteran that can handle the Dodgers, it is him. But I expect the Dodgers to score a few runs off him. On the other side, we got the Giants. They're a pretty average lineup in the last 30 days, 15th, 18th, and 18th. Last 14 days, slightly better than that, but as a whole, this Giants lineup, pretty mediocre. Same thing with the Giants numbers at home on the season. This is a slightly below average home lineup. Same in the last 30 days. And the fact that Landon Knack throws with his right hand is bad news because the Giants have been much better against lefties. On the last 30 days, the Giants are actually a bottom 5, bottom 6 lineup against right-handed pitching. And you can see they haven't really gotten to righty starters. The last 9 righties to pitch against the Giants, 3.14 ERA, 1.11 whip. Here are the game logs. They got to 2. They got to Michaelis and Palante, June 22nd and June 20th. Other than that, the Giants haven't touched righty starters. I mean, 7 innings, 1 run, 1 hit. Blanked them. Javier Assad, who's really been struggling, he threw a good game against them. Blanco. Spencer Arrighetti was able to throw a good game against him. Eovaldi. So Giants, yeah, I'd be down to get behind the Giants against a lefty, but really not jumping at the opportunity to back the Giants against a righty starter. Which brings us to Landon Knack, and we don't have a ton of data on this guy, but the numbers look good. I mean, on the season, he's got a 2.10 ERA and an 0.94 whip. He's only made 5 appearances, and his expected FIP indicates that he's had some good luck, but still, can't argue with these numbers. He's made 2 road starts. He's got a 2.45 ERA in him. I mean, that looks solid. Here are his game logs. I mean, I guess you can question the competition. The Angels, the Reds, the D-backs, they've been hitting righty, so that's solid, but the Nats twice. I mean, there's really not much we could say about Landon Knack. We don't really know. I will say his main pitches are the 4-seam fastball and the slider, and the Giants are bottom 10 against both those pitches in the last 30 days. So Landon Knack, yeah, he's seen some easy competition, but the Giants are easy competition if you throw with your right hand. So I have no reason to think Landon Knack can't pitch a good game here. As far as the bullpen matchup, no question, edge goes to the Dodgers, although expected FIP indicates the Dodgers have gotten really lucky and the Giants have gotten really unlucky. Can't read too much into that, though, because the numbers are pretty clear. The Dodgers bullpen has been better. As far as offenses against bullpens, the edge actually goes to the Giants recently. In the last 30 days, the Dodgers, but last 14 days, the Giants have been much better. In fact, the Dodgers, last 7 days, are the worst lineup in baseball in the late innings. Now, it's the last 7 days. That's an insanely small sample size. Something to take note of, though. As far as betting this game, it would only be the Dodgers here for me. I didn't bet this one. I don't know a ton about Landon Knack. But personally, I don't think this Giants team is very good. I certainly don't trust him against a righty starter, even though I don't really know much about him. Dodgers have shown us they're more than capable of getting to Logan Webb, so it would only be Dodgers here at a pick'em. It's a pick'em now, by the way. So it'll just be Dodgers or pass for me. Like I said earlier, live show, 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. If you're able to make it, would love to see you in the comments. We got Toast coming on and Just a Bet Outside. Jabo is what he saved in my phone as, J-A-B-O. So I have Just a Bet Outside coming on. We'll go through every single game on the board, make our final decisions. So if you're able to make it, cool. If you want my top bets or top bets from anyone on the staff here, head over to KyleKirms.com and sign up for Sauce Network Plus. I've had 4 straight winning days. Toast is on a heater too. So the website has done well recently. So if you're interested in that, sign up for Sauce Network Plus. Comes with top bets, access to the Discord, and you can participate in the weekly betting league. Every week, you're assigned a new opponent every day. The winner every week gets a trophy and $100. So if you're interested in that, head over to KyleKirms.com and sign up. Let's have ourselves a nice Friday night. It's definitely a loaded slate. Remember to bet responsibly, and I'll talk to you in the Discord.